My name is Carol Henderson. 40 years. That's how long it takes to turn a house into a home. 40 years of scraped knees, of holidays, of measuring heights on a door frame. 40 years of budgeting, of working double shifts when my husband passed, of putting my own dreams on hold to make sure my son, Michael, could have his. And on a perfect, crisp Tuesday in October, I had finally done it. The final mortgage payment was sent. The house, this monument of wood and memory, was finally completely mine. I'd bought a bottle of champagne, the good kind I never let myself have, and was chilling it for when Michael and his fiancée, Tiffany, came over for dinner. The air was so clean it felt like a promise. I was on the porch, pruning the last of the autumn roses, when the car pulled up. It wasn't Michael's sensible sedan. It was a Travis County Sheriff's vehicle. My first thought, the kind of panicked flutter every mother has, was that something had happened to Michael. I dropped the pruning shears and ran toward the curb, my heart a cold knot in my chest. But then the passenger door opened, and Michael got out. He was fine. He was perfectly fine. He was just not looking at me. His eyes were fixed on his own expensive sneakers as if they held the secrets to the universe. The sheriff, a tall man with a kind but weary face, got out of the driver's side and walked toward me, holding a clipboard. "Michael? What's going on? Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice tight with a confusion that was quickly turning sour. He wouldn't answer. He just stood there, a statue of shame on the lawn I had taught him to walk on. The sheriff stopped a respectful distance from the porch steps. "Ma'am, are you Carol Henderson?" "Yes, I am." "What is this about, officer?" He pulled a folded document from his clipboard. The paper was thick, official. "I'm here to serve you with this notice," he said, his voice a flat, procedural monotone. He held it out to me. My hands felt clumsy as I took it. "The owner of this property has filed for you to be removed." The world tilted. For a moment the words were just shapes on a page, a language I didn't understand. It felt like trying to read underwater. "Owner of the property?" I looked up from the paper, first at the sheriff, then at my son. There's been a mistake," I stammered. "I am the owner. I just paid it off. This morning." The sheriff's expression didn't change. He'd seen this 100 times. "According to this legally filed deed, ma'am, the property was transferred to Mr. Michael Henderson 90 days ago. He is the legal owner." I turned to my son, the piece of paper rattling in my hand. "Michael? What is he talking about? Why would you do this? This is some kind of horrible joke, right?" He finally looked up, and his eyes were hollow. There was no joke in them. There was nothing in them at all. "It's all legal, Mom," he mumbled, the words sounding foreign in his mouth, like he was reciting a line someone else had written for him. "You signed the papers." "What papers?" My voice was rising, cracking around the edges. This was the first why in a chain that felt endless. "I haven't signed any papers to give you my house. Why would I do that? When would I have done that?" "After your fall," he said, his gaze dropping back to the ground. "When I was helping with the medical forms, it was all in there." The memory was a blur of pain and worry, a sprained wrist, a brief hospital stay. Michael, so concerned, so helpful, sitting at my kitchen table with a thick stack of documents. "For the insurance, Mom," he'd said, "to let me talk to the doctors." I'd trusted him. I'd signed where he told me to sign, my hand aching, my mind clouded with painkillers and relief that my son was there to take care of me. It was like remembering a nightmare you were convinced wasn't real until you saw the scratch marks on your own arms. The trust I'd given him my whole life had been a weapon, and he had aimed it right at my heart. "Those were medical forms, Michael. You told me they were medical forms. The question wasn't a question anymore. It was an accusation. It was the sound of a life breaking." The sheriff cleared his throat, a gentle interruption into our private apocalypse. "Ma'am, I understand this is difficult, but my purpose here isn't to debate the circumstances. This notice informs you that you have 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days. 4 weeks to pack up 40 years. 30 days to dismantle a life." The number was an insult. It was so specific, so cold. It was the data point that made the nightmare real. I looked past him, at the house. My house. The windows looked like vacant eyes. The oak tree my late husband and I planted seemed to droop in sorrow. Everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed for, was being repossessed by my own blood. Michael wouldn't look at me again. He just got back in the car, a passenger in the destruction of his own family, and slammed the door. The sound echoed in the quiet street, a final, brutal punctuation mark. The sheriff gave me a nod that was probably meant to be sympathetic, then walked back to his vehicle and drove away, leaving me alone on the porch of a home that was no longer mine, holding the proof in my hand. The sound of the sheriff's engine faded, leaving behind a silence that was louder and more violent than any shout. The world had shrunk to the space between my front porch and my son, who stood on the grass like a stranger who had forgotten his lines. The official eviction notice in my hand felt heavier than a tombstone. For a moment, neither of us moved. The October breeze rustled the leaves in the gutter, a sound that had always felt like home, but now sounded like a whisper of decay. "Michael." My voice came out as a croak. "Look at me." He flinched, but he did it. He lifted his head, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of the boy. I raised a flash of fear, of regret, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a dull, concrete wall. His eyes were his father's, but the coldness in them was entirely new. "Please," I begged, taking a step toward him. "Just talk to me. What was that? Why did he say you're the owner?" That was the first why, the one that assumed this was all a terrible, fixable mistake. Michael looked away, pulling his phone from his pocket as if a text message could save him. "I told you, Mom. It's legal. It's just a transfer of assets, a financial strategy." The words were so clinical, so detached. They were words for a boardroom, not for a mother whose world had just been stolen. A financial strategy. What are you talking about? "Michael, this is my home. Why did you lie to me about the papers?" The second why. Deeper, sharper. "I didn't lie," he said, his voice gaining a brittle edge of defiance. He was parroting a script. I could almost hear Tiffany's voice whispering the words in his ear. It was a quitclaim deed. It was all there in black and white. You should have read it more carefully. The cruelty of that statement knocked the air from my lungs. I had been in pain, trusting my own son to help me. The idea that I was somehow at fault was a second, more vicious betrayal. It was like being blamed for being stabbed. I walked right up to him then, close enough to see the pulse hammering in his throat. "Why do you need my house, Michael?" The third why. The one that searched for a motive I could understand, a reason that wasn't pure evil. "Is this about money? Are you in some kind of trouble? Why didn't you just ask me for help? You know I would have given you anything." "That's the problem, Mom," he snapped, finally showing a real emotion. Anger, resentment. "You always just give. You don't understand how the world works. You have to secure your assets, protect your future. Tiffany's uncle is a lawyer," he explained it all. "This is the smartest way to do it. It protects the house as a family asset." His words were a twisted maze of logic that led nowhere. Protect the house? He was kicking me out of it. Family asset? He was destroying our family to possess it. It felt like listening to a man describe how he was saving a drowning person while holding their head under water. The mention of Tiffany was the key. She was the ghost in this machine, the one who had rewritten my son's moral code. I reached out and grabbed his arm, my fingers digging into the fabric of his expensive jacket. "Your future? What about my future, Michael? The one I was supposed to have right here in my own home? The one I worked 40 years for? The fourth why. The one that was no longer about him, but about me." He pulled his arm away, shaking his head as if I were a child having a tantrum. "You're being emotional. You can get a small apartment. You don't need all this space anyway. We'll even help you with the first month's rent." That was it. That was the line that broke me. The offer of a month's rent for a lifetime of sacrifice. I looked at the face of my son, the boy I had held, the man I had been so proud of, and I had to ask the final, terrifying question. "Who are you? Why are you doing this to me?" He had no answer for that. The script was finished. He just shook his head one last time, turned, and walked to his car without looking back. I stood there and watched him drive away until his car was just a speck, until the street was empty again. I walked back into my house, each step an effort. The act of turning the doorknob felt wrong, like I was breaking and entering. Stepping inside was like stepping into a stranger's home, where they just happened to have all my things. The air was cold. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old books replaced by the sterile smell of betrayal. My gaze fell on the kitchen counter. The champagne bottle, still sleek and cool, stood there like a monument to a future that had died this afternoon. The promise of a peaceful, secure retirement, of holidays with future grandchildren, of growing old in the comfort I had earned, all of it, gone. I sank into the armchair by the window, the eviction notice still clutched in my hand, a flimsy piece of paper that weighed more than my entire life. To understand how I signed away my own home without even knowing it. To understand the son I had raised. We have to go back 1 year, to a time when I still believed my only job was to give him everything. A year before the eviction, my world was small, but it was whole. It was the 4 walls of the house on Chestnut Street, the scent of the rose bushes after a summer rain, and the sound of my son Michael's laughter. My life was a well-ordered list of quiet, happy duties. A life of silent sacrifices, yes, but I never thought of them as sacrifices. They were just what a mother does. The house wasn't just wood and nails to me. It was the storybook of our family. Every scratch on the floor was a chapter. Every faded patch on the wallpaper was a memory. That evening, I was making Michael's favorite meal, roasted chicken with rosemary potatoes. He and Tiffany were coming for our weekly Sunday dinner. I was polishing the silver forks my own mother had given me, the ones I only used for special occasions. Every Sunday with my son felt like a special occasion. As the chicken sizzled in the oven, I sat down at the kitchen table with my old laptop to pay some bills. The numbers on the screen told the story of my life. My Social Security check was a fixed $1,850 a month. After the mortgage payment, still $950 back then, and the rising Austin energy bills, I was often left with less than $500 for groceries, gas, and everything else. But every month, without fail, the first thing I did was transfer $200 to a separate account I'd labeled Michael's Future. It was to help him pay down the mountain of student loans he'd graduated with. Seeing that balance go down, even by a little bit, felt like a bigger accomplishment than saving for myself. A pop-up ad for a Caribbean cruise flashed on the screen, a sunny beach, a smiling gray-haired couple. I looked at it for a moment, a brief daydream, then closed the window with a sigh. My ship had sailed a long time ago. Michael was my Caribbean cruise now. When the doorbell rang, I hurried to answer it, wiping my hands on my apron. Michael stood on the porch holding a bouquet of daisies, my favorite. And next to him was Tiffany, looking like she'd just stepped out of a magazine. Her smile was perfect. Her blonde hair was perfect. Her gratitude seemed perfect. "Oh, Carol, you shouldn't have gone to all this trouble," she said, stepping inside and handing me a bottle of wine. I never drank wine, but I appreciated the gesture. "It's never any trouble for you two," I said, and I meant it. My joy was a simple equation. If Michael was happy, I was happy. Dinner was filled with easy conversation. Michael talked about a new project at his software engineering job, and Tiffany told a funny story about her work at the art gallery downtown. I just listened, refilling their glasses, passing the potatoes, basking in the warmth of having them at my table. I felt needed. I felt like the anchor that kept their busy lives steady. Then, as I was about to clear the plates, Michael reached across the table and put his hand on mine. He looked at Tiffany, and she gave him a small, encouraging nod. "Mom," he began, his voice a little shaky, "there's something we wanted to tell you." I looked between their two smiling, nervous faces, and I knew. My heart gave a little jump. "Oh?" He took a deep breath. "Tiffany and we're getting married. Isn't ever people dead?" The words were the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Tears sprang to my eyes instantly. Not sad tears, but tears of pure, unadulterated joy. I was on my feet and hugging them both, laughing and crying at the same time. My boy, my little boy, was getting married. He was building a life, a future, and I had helped. All the double shifts, the patched-up clothes, the canceled vacations, they all felt worth it in that single perfect moment. "Oh, Michael, that's wonderful. Tiffany, welcome to the family, sweetheart." I squeezed her hand. "We have to have an engagement party right here. We'll invite everyone. And the wedding, whatever you need, I'll help. I have some savings." "Oh, Carol, no." Tiffany said quickly, her smile tightening just a fraction. "You're too sweet. We couldn't possibly let you do all that." She looked around the dining room, her eyes lingering on the high ceilings and the original hardwood floors, especially in this big old house. "It must be so much work to keep it all up just for you." At the time, I heard her words as a compliment, as loving concern. It felt like she was admiring my home, my life's work. I beamed, completely missing the cold assessment happening behind her eyes. She wasn't seeing a home filled with memories. She was seeing square footage. She wasn't seeing a mother's sanctuary. She was seeing an asset. "It's my pleasure," I said, my heart so full I thought it might burst. "This house is for family. It always has been." I didn't know then that they had a very different definition of what that meant. I went to bed that night feeling like the luckiest woman in the world, never suspecting that the foundation of my life had just been appraised, and that the people I loved most were already making plans to build their future on top of my ruins. The joy of their engagement carried me for weeks. I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just Carol Henderson, widow, and mother of a grown son anymore. I was the future mother-in-law, a vital part of a new family being built. My support was unconditional. I spent my evenings browsing Zillow, sending them links to charming little bungalows in South Austin, imagining them starting their own lives just a few miles from me. I was their biggest cheerleader, completely oblivious to the fact that they didn't want a house like mine. They wanted mine. The first cracks appeared on a sweltering Sunday in late July. They were supposed to come for dinner, but they arrived 2 hours early, unannounced. The moment they walked in, I could feel a storm cloud had entered with them. Michael was pacing, running his hands through his hair, while Tiffany slumped onto my sofa, the picture of defeat. "What's wrong, you two? You look like you've seen a ghost," I said, handing them both a glass of iced tea. "Worse, Mom. We've seen the Austin real estate market," Michael groaned. "We just came from an open house over in Zilker, a tiny little place, maybe 1,200 square feet. The pictures online looked great." "The pictures were a lie," Tiffany cut in, her voice flat. "The foundation was cracked, and it smelled like mildew. And you know what they were asking for it?" I shook my head. $750,000, Michael said, the number landing like a punch. "And the realtor told us to expect a bidding war. Said it would probably go for $80,000 over asking. All cash." I sat down, stunned. That's criminal." "It's just what it is," Tiffany said with a sigh, swirling the ice in her glass. "Our generation is locked out. We both have good jobs, but with our student loan payments almost $1,200 a month between us, the bank won't pre-approve us for anything that can actually compete with the tech money flooding this city." End of that mand. Her frustration felt real, and my heart ached for them. I remembered how hard my late husband and I had to save for our down payment, and that was when a house in this neighborhood cost less than a new car does today. "Don't you worry," I said, trying to be the calm center in their storm. "The right thing will come along. It always does. You just have to be patient." Tiffany gave me a tight smile. It didn't reach her eyes. "Patience doesn't pay the rent on our apartment, Carol, or stop interest rates from climbing." She took a slow look around my living room, her eyes scanning the high ceilings, the formal dining room, the staircase leading to the second floor. "It's just wild. Here we are, desperate for a patch of grass to call our own, and you're here in this beautiful, huge house." She paused, letting the statement hang in the air. "Do you ever even go upstairs anymore?" The question was so casual, but it felt oddly pointed. "Well, no, not really," I admitted. "Just to dust and make sure the windows are locked. Michael's old room is mostly for storage now." "Exactly," she said, pouncing on the admission. "You have 3 bedrooms and 2 full baths that are completely empty. And the property taxes you must pay on all this unused space, it's staggering. When you really think about it, it's like you're paying a fortune in rent for rooms you don't even live in." Her words were like sharp little pebbles flicked against a window pane. They didn't break anything, but they made a sound you couldn't ignore. An analogy came to me then. It was like she was an inspector, assessing my life for inefficiencies. Michael shifted uncomfortably on his feet. "Tiff, come on. Let's not." "What?" she said, turning to him with wide, innocent eyes. This was the gentle counter-perspective, his flimsy attempt to shield me, which only highlighted her aggression. I'm just being practical. I worry about you, Carol. All this cleaning, the yard work, the constant upkeep, it's a huge burden for one person to manage. We just want you to be comfortable and secure." The word burden landed with a quiet thud. It was a word I'd spent my entire life trying not to be. For 40 years this house had been my pride, my accomplishment. In the space of 30 seconds she had reframed it as my weakness, a problem to be managed. I forced a smile, the muscles in my face feeling stiff. "It's no trouble at all. I like puttering around. It keeps me busy." Tiffany just nodded, taking a delicate sip of her tea, her point made. The conversation moved on, but the cracks were there. I had felt a subtle shift in the foundation of my family. For the first time, I felt a strange and unwelcome need to defend my life, my home, from the concerned, calculating gaze of the woman my son was going to marry. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a conversation that was far from over. After Tiffany's comments about my house, a tiny seed of unease had been planted. But a mother's love is a stubborn thing. It pulls the weeds of doubt and focuses only on the flower. I told myself she was just stressed about the wedding. I chose to believe the best because the alternative was too painful to consider. It was this willful blindness, this deep-seated need to see my son as perfect, that led me to the next, much larger crack in the foundation. It happened a month later. Michael called me on a Tuesday morning. "Hey Mom, can I come over this afternoon? Alone?" The word alone hung in the air. Tiffany had become a permanent fixture at his side. For him to request a solo visit was so unusual, it immediately set off a quiet alarm in my gut. "Of course, sweetheart. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, fine. Just want to talk," he said, his voice strained. He was a terrible liar. He arrived looking exhausted. He sat at my kitchen table, the same place he'd done his homework as a boy, and fiddled with a loose thread on his jeans. He couldn't look at me. I poured him a cup of coffee and waited. Finally, after a long, painful silence, he spoke. "It's about money, Mom." My heart sank. I thought of their struggle to find a house. "Did you find a place? Do you need help with a down payment?" I was already mentally calculating what I could sell, what I could live without. He shook his head, a flush of shame creeping up his neck. "No, it's Tiffany. She has some debt from before we were engaged, on her credit cards." I tried to keep my expression neutral. I'd raised Michael to be responsible with money, to live within his means. "Okay," I said slowly. "A lot of young people have some debt." "It's more than some," he mumbled, finally looking at me. His eyes were pleading. "It's bad. The interest rate is killing us. We're trying to save for the wedding and the house, but every month this thing just gets bigger. We're drowning." My mind started to race, asking the questions I wouldn't dare say out loud. Why does she have so much debt? Why didn't she tell you about this before you got engaged? Why are you here asking me, instead of the two of you figuring this out together? But I silenced that voice. That was the voice of judgment. I was a mother. My job was to help, not to judge. "How much is it, Michael?" He stared at the table. It's almost $7,000. The number felt like a physical blow. To me, $7,000 was a fortune. It was a new roof. It was a year's worth of property taxes. He must have seen the shock on my face because he started talking faster, the words tumbling out in a rush. "It's mostly on a Capital One card, and the APR is 24%. It's predatory, Mom. It's from some deposits for the wedding, a new laptop she needed for work, a shopping trip. It just got out of hand. We can't get ahead." That's when he did it. He pushed his chair back, stood up, and began to pace, the picture of a man trapped. "We were thinking, and this is hard to ask, but we were hoping you could help. Just a loan. We swear, we'll pay you back every single penny, with interest if you want, as soon as we're on our feet after the wedding." Ever pressed. The room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I thought of my emergency savings account. My late husband, Tom, had been the practical one. "Carol," he'd always said, "a safety net is for falling. It's not a trampoline for someone else's bad decisions." His voice was so clear in my head, a gentle, sensible warning from a man who had always protected me. That money was my protection now. It was my bulwark against the unexpected, a major car repair, a sudden health crisis, the things that can capsize a person living on a fixed income. I stood up and went to my laptop, my movements slow and deliberate. I logged into my USAA account. The screen glowed with the number I had worked so hard to save. Emergency savings, $8,452.14. For a moment, I just stared at it. It was the most beautiful number in the world. It was security. It was peace of mind. Then I looked at Michael. His face was a mask of anxiety and hope. He was my son, my only son, and he was in trouble. In that moment, Tom's sensible voice faded, and my mother's heart took over. A heart programmed for 40 years to put his needs before my own. Smoothing his path was my job. It was my identity. I turned back to the screen. I can't give you the whole thing, Michael. I need to keep something in there. Relief washed over his face so completely it was like watching the sun come out. Oh, Mom, of course. Anything helps. Thank you. Thank you so much. I clicked on the transfer funds button. I typed in the amount, $7,000. It felt like typing a confession. A little box popped up. Are you sure you want to complete this transfer? I took a breath and clicked confirm. The screen refreshed. Emergency savings, $1,452.14. My safety net was gone. I had let them cut it down to help them with a problem they had created, and the promise of repayment felt as thin as a spider's web. Michael hugged me, his relief so profound he didn't seem to notice the tremor in my hands. He left a few minutes later, promising to have Tiffany call me to thank me. She never did. I just sat there, staring at the screen, at a number that screamed of my own foolishness. I had just taught my son and his fiancée a very dangerous lesson, that my boundaries were optional and my security was for sale. It was a lesson they would not forget. After I gave them the money, a quiet tension settled into our relationship. The weekly Sunday dinners continued, but there was an unspoken debt in the air, a topic we all skillfully avoided. I tried to ignore the hollowed-out feeling in my bank account, focusing instead on the wedding plans and the forced brightness of Tiffany's thank you card, which had arrived a week late. I told myself I had done the right thing. I had helped. But in the process, I had shown them I was willing to set myself on fire to keep them warm. It was a flaw in my character they had logged, filed away, and would soon exploit. The perfect pretext came on a Saturday in late September. The fall weather in Austin was finally breaking the summer heat, and I was in my garden, my sanctuary, wrestling with a stubborn patch of weeds that had taken over the azalea bush. I was so focused on yanking a particularly deep root that I didn't see the loose paving stone my foot had caught on. One moment I was upright, the next I was on the ground, a blinding white-hot pain shooting up from my left wrist. I knew instantly it wasn't broken, but it wasn't right either. I managed to get myself inside, my whole arm throbbing in time with my heartbeat. After icing it for 20 minutes, I knew I couldn't just ignore it. Annoyed but resolute, I wrapped it in a dish towel, grabbed my purse and car keys, and drove myself to the Austin Regional Clinic's urgent care facility over on Far West Boulevard. My independence was a point of pride. I wasn't the kind of woman who needed to be rescued. The clinic was clean, efficient, and blessedly quick. A kind physician's assistant took one look, sent me for an X-ray, and confirmed my suspicion. "No fractures, Carol," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "You have a moderate sprain. Nothing to panic about. We'll get you fitted for a sling, and you'll need to wear it for a couple of weeks. Take some Advil for the pain. You'll be back to gardening in no time." His professional demeanor was a perfect counter-perspective to the drama that would follow. He saw the situation for exactly what it was, a common, temporary injury. A nuisance, not a catastrophe. I called Michael from the car on my way home, purely as a courtesy. "Just wanted to let you know I had a little tumble in the garden," I said, keeping my tone light. "Sprained my wrist, but I'm all patched up and heading home. Nothing to worry about." His reaction was immediate and, to my ears, wildly out of proportion. "You fell? Mom, why didn't you call me? You shouldn't have driven yourself. Are you okay? We're on our way over right now." Before I could protest, he had hung up. By the time I pulled into my driveway, his sedan was already squealing to a stop behind me. Michael and Tiffany rushed out of the car like a paramedic team arriving at a 5-alarm fire. Their worry was like a thick, heavy blanket. At first it felt warm and comforting, but I soon realized I couldn't move underneath it. "Mom, you gave us such a scare," Michael said, trying to help me out of the car as if I'd lost the use of my legs. "Carol, my goodness, look at you," Tiffany said, her eyes wide with what looked like horror as she stared at the simple black sling on my arm. "You poor thing. You can't be doing all this yard work by yourself. We've told you." They bustled me inside and onto the sofa, fluffing pillows behind my head. Tiffany went into the kitchen to make tea, and I could hear her clanking around, opening and closing cabinets. "Carol, where do you keep your nice mugs?" she called out. "Not these old chipped ones." Michael, meanwhile, launched into a full inspection of my house. He checked the batteries and the smoke detectors. He peered into the fuse box in the utility closet. He made a concerned noise about a loose floorboard in the hallway. Every action, every comment, was a specific example of his manufactured concern, designed to build a case against my competence. He wasn't my son checking on his mother. He was a home inspector looking for code violations. "You see, Mom?" he said, kneeling in front of me, his voice low and serious. "This is what we worry about. What if you had hit your head? What if you couldn't get to your phone? You're all alone here." "Michael, I'm perfectly fine," I said, my patience beginning to fray. "It's a sprained wrist. The doctor said I'll be fine in a few weeks. It's not the end of the world." "But it could have been," Tiffany said, returning with a tray. She handed me a mug, one of her choosing from the back of my cabinet, and looked at me with an expression of profound pity. "This is a wake-up call. We have to be more proactive about your care." The rest of their visit was a suffocating performance of over-the-top helpfulness, each act a subtle indictment of my ability to live on my own. They insisted on ordering dinner from Central Market so I wouldn't have to cook. Tiffany went through my refrigerator, throwing out a carton of milk that was one day past its expiration date with a theatrical sigh. I felt like a child. My simple, manageable life was being reframed as a series of hazards I was too frail to navigate. As they were finally leaving, standing in the doorway, Tiffany placed a cool hand on my good arm. "We're not going to let you just brush this off, Carol," she said, her voice dripping with syrupy concern. "We need to figure out a better system to help you manage things. We can't let something like this happen again." Her words weren't a comfort, they were a threat. I watched them walk to their car, not as a loving son and his fiancée, but as two opportunists who had just been handed the perfect key. My minor fall in the garden had become their golden opportunity, the perfect, unimpeachable pretext to begin their quiet, caring, and complete takeover of my life. Tiffany's ominous promise to figure out a better system hung in the air for a week. I tried to dismiss it as the overzealous concern of a future daughter-in-law, but it left a chill I couldn't shake. Then, the following Friday, Michael called. His voice was different. It was cheerful, efficient, and unnervingly brisk. "Good news, Mom," he said. "I spent the whole morning on the phone with Street David's billing department and your insurance company. It's a bureaucratic nightmare, but I think I've got all the paperwork we need to get ahead of it. Can I pop over in about an hour?" Relief washed over me, chasing the chill away. My son was being responsible. He was taking care of me. It was everything I had raised him to be. "Of course, sweetheart, that would be a wonderful help." He arrived with a handsome leather portfolio tucked under his arm and a latte from Starbucks in his hand for me. "A little treat," he said, placing it on the kitchen table. "You just sit and relax. I'll walk you through everything. It'll only take 10 minutes. He opened the portfolio and laid out a stack of papers that was at least an inch thick. The sheer volume of it was intimidating. My heart sank a little. "Goodness, Michael, is all of that really necessary for a sprained wrist?" "You'd be surprised," he said with a confident laugh. "It's the system. They make it complicated on purpose." He pulled a single sheet from the top. His explanation was like a fast-flowing river of words, designed to sweep away any questions before they could take root. "Okay, first one is easy," he said, tapping a yellow sticky flag pointing to a signature line. "This is just a standard HIPAA release. It's a privacy thing. It gives me permission to speak with the doctors about your follow-up appointments and physical therapy. You have to sign one for every new incident. Standard stuff. Sign right here." I took the pen he offered. With my good hand, I signed my name. It felt good to trust him, to lean on him. He immediately slid the next paper in front of me. This one is a medical directive, just confirming you want me to be your primary point of contact. Initial here and here. I did as he asked. The rhythm began. He would slide a paper, give a brief, plausible-sounding explanation, and I would sign. Each signature eroded my vigilance a little more. My trust in him was a current, and I was letting it carry me along without a fight. Then came a thicker document, several pages stapled together. "Now, this one is the most important," he said, his tone serious. "This is a durable power of attorney. I had Tiffany's uncle, the lawyer, draft it for us. This is what lets me really get to work for you. It gives me the authority to talk to the insurance company, pay the hospital bills directly from your account, and dispute any charges. It's a huge time saver. We can revoke it as soon as you're feeling better." He was selling it as a convenience, a temporary tool. He didn't explain that the word durable meant it was anything but temporary. He had already flagged the signature page. I could only see the last few paragraphs. A tiny voice, my late husband Tom's voice, flickered in the back of my mind. "Read the fine print, Carol." Shouldn't I read this one more carefully?" I asked, my voice hesitant. Michael gave me a patient smile, the kind one gives to a well-meaning but slightly confused child. "Mom, you could, but it's all just standard legal boilerplate. It would take you an hour. Tiffany's uncle already vetted it. It's the same form he used for his own mother. Do you trust me?" That was the kill shot. "Of course I trust you, honey." I signed my name, the pen stroke feeling heavier this time. He beamed, his relief palpable. He gathered the signed papers into a neat pile. Perfect. Just one last thing. He slid a single-page document from the very bottom of the portfolio, keeping it mostly covered by the folder itself. A single sticky flag pointed to a line at the bottom. "What's this one?" I asked, reaching for it. He gently put his hand on top of it. "Oh, this is nothing. It's just a property liability waiver for the insurance company. Since the accident happened on your property, they require a form that confirms who the primary resident is and who's responsible for the upkeep. It's just a formality to close out the claim. We just need to get it notarized and we're all set." The lie was so smooth, so casual. He was using my trust as a shield to hide the truth. He pulled out his phone. And we're in luck. Tiffany's friend Jessica just became a mobile notary. I told her we might need her and she's just a few blocks away. She said she can swing by in 5 minutes to stamp it. Super easy. The efficiency of it all was disarming. Before I could even process it, the doorbell rang. A young woman with a bright, cheerful smile stood on the porch, a small bag slung over her shoulder. She came in, exchanged friendly hellos with Michael, and set her stamp and logbook on the table. "Hey, Carol, I'm Jessica. Sorry to hear about your wrist," she said, her voice breezy. She opened the document to the signature page. "Okay, I just need to see your driver's license, and then you sign right here, and I'll do my thing." I signed where she pointed, my name scrawled awkwardly next to the dense, unread paragraph. She pressed her official seal into the paper, the crisp thump of the stamp echoing in the quiet kitchen. She made a quick entry in her log, and just like that, it was done. Michael paid her in cash, and she was gone in less than 3 minutes. He carefully placed the notarized document into his portfolio and zipped it shut. He leaned over and kissed me on the forehead. "There," he said, his voice full of warmth. "All done. Now you don't have to worry about a single thing. I'll take care of everything from here." He left, taking my entire life with him in that leather portfolio. I sat alone at my kitchen table, sipping the now lukewarm latte he'd brought me, feeling nothing but a profound sense of relief. I felt cared for. I felt protected. I had no idea I had just signed my own death warrant. The months that followed were a blur of blissful ignorance. My wrist healed perfectly, leaving behind only a faint ache on rainy days. Michael took care of all the follow-up bills from the clinic, proudly telling me he'd gotten the insurance company to cover everything. I felt so grateful, so protected. My son was stepping up, taking on the responsibilities of a man. I saw his actions as proof of his love, never once suspecting they were the calculated steps of a thief casing a vault. The day I made the final mortgage payment felt like the first day of the rest of my life. I walked back from the mailbox holding the official paid-in-full letter from Wells Fargo, and it felt more valuable than a winning lottery ticket. 40 years of work, of worry, of sacrifice, all distilled into a single beautiful piece of paper. This called for a real celebration. That perfect Tuesday in October, my house was filled with the sounds it was made for: laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. I'd invited a few old friends and neighbors, the people who had watched Michael grow up. The dining room table was laden with food: my famous brisket, Sarah's 7-layer dip, a cooler full of Shiner Bock on the back porch. It was perfect. Michael and Tiffany arrived looking like a power couple, Tiffany in a sharp dress and Michael beaming with pride. "We are so proud of you, Carol," Tiffany said, giving me an airy hug. 40 years in one place. It's just incredible. What are you going to do with all your extra money every month now that the mortgage is gone?" Her question seemed innocent, a natural curiosity, but looking back, I realized she was probing, updating her financial calculus of my life. My old friend Sarah, who had lived next door for 30 of those years, pulled me into a real hug, her embrace warm and genuine. "You deserve this, Carol," she whispered in my ear. "After everything you've put into this place and into that boy, it's finally your time to just relax and enjoy it." Her words were a gentle counter-perspective to the chaos of my life, a moment of pure, uncomplicated validation. Later, Michael tapped a fork against his champagne flute, calling for quiet. "Everyone, my mom, the official queen of Chestnut Street, would like to say a few words." Sarah danded as a parted. Our friends applauded, and I felt a blush rise in my cheeks. I stood up, holding my own glass, my hand steady, my heart full. "Oh, goodness," I began, laughing. "I don't have a speech prepared. I want to thank you all for being here, looking around this room, at all of you. This is what makes a house a home." I took a breath, my eyes scanning the familiar walls. When my late husband Tom and I first bought this house, it felt like a huge, terrifying responsibility. But over the years, it became our safe harbor. This house has been like a ship, seeing our family through every storm. We brought our son home from the hospital to this house. He took his first steps right there by the fireplace. We survived scraped knees, teenage heartbreaks, and even the sorrow of loss within these walls. It has always, always kept us safe. I raised my glass a little higher, my voice thick with emotion. Today, after 40 years, I finally own the ship outright. I own the harbor. For the first time in my adult life, I feel completely and totally secure. This foundation is solid, so I want to make a toast. To family, to friends, and to a long, happy, and secure future built right here on a foundation of love. The room erupted in cheers and applause. "To Carol!" someone shouted. Michael and Tiffany came and hugged me tightly. "We love you, Mom," Michael said, his voice sincere. In that moment, surrounded by love and warmth, I was happier than I had ever been. That's when the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the happy chatter, sharp and clear. I pulled back from my son's embrace, smiling. "Oh, that must be David from down the street. He said he might be a little late." I walked toward the front door, my heart light, my mind already composing a friendly admonishment for his tardiness. The party was in full swing, the house was filled with light, and my life was finally, perfectly, my own. I was ready to pull another friend into the celebration. I reached the door, turned the knob, and swung it open, my welcoming smile already on my face. But it wasn't a guest. Standing on my porch, framed by the rose bushes I planted 30 years ago, wasn't a stranger. It was my son, Michael. And he wasn't alone. He was with a county sheriff. The smile on my face froze and shattered, and the warm, happy room behind me seemed to fall away into a cold, silent void. The flashback was over. The worst moment of my life was happening all over again, and this time I understood everything that had led me to it. The world doesn't end with a bang. It ends with the click of a cheap motel room door that doesn't quite shut properly. We are back in the present. 2 weeks have passed since I opened my front door to a nightmare. 2 weeks of living in a purgatory called the Motel 6 off I-35, where the rumbling of semi-trucks is a constant, lonely lullaby. Grief is not a river. It's a small gray room with no windows or doors. You just sit in it, breathing the same stale air of your own sorrow, until you forget what the sun feels like. For 14 days I sat in that room. I watched game shows where people shrieked with joy over winning a new washer-dryer set, and I felt nothing. I ate Fritos from the vending machine for dinner. I watched the flickering fluorescent light in the bathroom cast long, dancing shadows on the stained brown carpet. My entire 40-year life had been condensed into a single cardboard box on the floor next to my bed. My savings, the money I'd foolishly drained for a son who was actively plotting my destruction, was almost gone. The $1,400 I had left was disappearing at a rate of $79 a night, plus tax. I was a ship taking on water, and all I could do was sit and watch the waterline rise. The loneliness was the worst part. It was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I had been devalued, discarded, and I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. This afternoon, the game show host's cheerful voice finally broke something in me. I clicked the television off. The sudden silence was a shock. It was just me and the hum of the mini-fridge and the relentless questions that I had been too heartbroken to ask. For the first time, I let them come. Why? The first why was simple. Why did he do this? For the house, for the money it represented, for the future Tiffany wanted, built on the foundation of my past. The second was sharper. Why did he think he could get away with it? And the answer was a slap in the face, because he saw me as old, weak, a sweet, simple-minded woman who wouldn't understand the complexities of what he'd done. He thought my love for him had made me stupid. He assumed I would just crumble, fade away into a sad little apartment, and die without a fight. He counted on my grief to paralyze me. And that led to the third, most painful why. Why did I let myself become so helpless in his eyes? Because for 40 years, I had confused sacrifice with self-erasure. I had poured so much of myself into being his mother that I'd forgotten who Carol Henderson was. I'd made his comfort my only job, and in the end, my reward was to be downsized. A hot, unfamiliar feeling began to uncoil in my stomach. It was anger, pure, clean, and energizing. It burned away the fog of grief. It was a fire in the cold, gray room. The fourth why came with it. Why am I just sitting here, in this dump, letting him win? I had no good answer for that. None at all. I looked at the cardboard box. My life. I knelt and opened it. On top was a framed photo of my late husband, Tom, and me, taken the day we bought the house. We were so young, standing on the porch, his arm wrapped tightly around me, both of us beaming with a kind of hope that only the young can have. Tom had never seen me as weak. He'd seen me as his partner, the quiet, meticulous manager who could stretch a dollar until it screamed, and who kept our lives running with quiet competence. And that's when the final, most important why hit me. Why don't I use that competence to fight back? My son had made a terrible mistake. He had remembered the loving, self-sacrificing mother, but he had forgotten the woman who had balanced a budget to the penny for 4 decades. He'd forgotten the woman who organized, planned, and executed every detail of our family's life. He had forgotten the investigator who could find a missing library book in a cluttered house in under 5 minutes. He thought he was robbing a frail old lady. He had no idea he was robbing a project manager. Something inside me shifted. The victim was gone. I stood up and walked to the small, cracked mirror above the sink. I looked at my reflection, the tired eyes, the new lines of grief etched around my mouth. But for the first time in 2 weeks, I didn't see a victim. I saw a survivor, and I saw a fighter. My movements became sharp, deliberate. I washed my face with cold water. I pulled my hair back into a tight, no-nonsense ponytail. I put on a clean blouse and a pair of slacks, the clothes of a woman with a purpose. I didn't have a law degree. I didn't have any money. But I had a brain that was now clicking and whirring with cold, clear anger. I didn't know how to win a war, but I knew how to find the first clue. My son, in his arrogance, believed he had committed the perfect crime, but he had used the legal system to do it. And the legal system, for all its flaws, keeps records. He had left a paper trail. I walked to the nightstand and picked up the eviction notice, the document that had started my nightmare. Now, it was no longer a death warrant. It was a map. It had a docket number. It had dates. It had the name of the court. It was the first breadcrumb. I grabbed my purse and my car keys. As I walked out of that dim, gray motel room, I wasn't a grieving mother anymore. I was an investigator, and my first stop was the Travis County Records Office. My son wanted my house. Fine. He was about to find out exactly who he had evicted. Anger is a powerful fuel. It cleared the fog from my mind and replaced the hum of despair with the sharp, clear purpose of a hunter on a trail. I drove away from that bleak motel not knowing where my journey would end, but for the first time in 2 weeks, I knew exactly what the next step was. The Travis County Records Office was a cold, imposing building downtown, all concrete and bureaucratic indifference. It was the kind of place designed to make you feel small and insignificant. 2 weeks ago, it would have intimidated me into silence. Today, I walked through its doors with my shoulders back and my chin up. I was no longer a grieving mother. I was a citizen demanding public records. I waited in line, the certified copy of the eviction notice clutched in my hand. When my turn came, I stepped up to a plexiglass window. A clerk with tired eyes looked at me without interest. "How can I help you?" "I need a copy of the most recently filed deed for this property," I said, my voice steady. I slid the notice under the glass, my finger pointing to the address. 123 Chestnut Street. The clerk, a woman who was just a cog in a giant uncaring machine, was the perfect gentle counter-perspective to my inner turmoil. She didn't offer sympathy or ask questions. She just did her job. "That'll be a $5 search fee, and then $1 per page for the copy. Certified copy is an extra $5. Cash or check." I paid the fee and sat on a hard plastic bench to wait. 20 minutes later, she called my name. She handed me a thin sheaf of papers, held together with a heavy-duty staple and embossed with a gold county seal. I thanked her and walked back to the bench, my heart hammering against my ribs. Holding that document was like holding the murder weapon. It was cold, clinical, and it told the whole story without saying a word. I forced myself to read every line. There it was in stark black and white, the data and evidence of my own execution. The grantor, Carol Henderson. The grantee, Michael Henderson. And the date it was filed with the county, September 26th, just 2 days after my fall, 2 days after their suffocating performance of concern. Then I saw the final damning piece of evidence at the bottom, the notary's signature and seal, Jessica Albright, Tiffany's friend, the cheerful young woman who had breezed in and out of my house in under 3 minutes. The whole thing had been a coordinated, premeditated attack. This wasn't a son's momentary weakness, it was a conspiracy. For a moment, the grief threatened to return, a wave of sickness rising in my throat, but the anger pushed it back down. I folded the papers, put them in my purse, and walked out into the Texas sunlight. They had been smart, they had been meticulous, but so was I. Sitting in my car, I pulled out my phone and typed, "Free legal help for seniors Austin." The first result was for the Central Texas Legal Aid Clinic. I called the number. A harried but kind voice on the other end listened for a moment and then said, "We have a cancellation this afternoon at 3 p.m. Can you be here?" The clinic was in a small, cramped office that smelled of old paper and fresh coffee. I was led back to a room where a young woman sat behind a desk piled high with files. She looked no older than 30, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of professional impatience. "Mrs. Henderson," she said, gesturing to a chair without standing up. "I'm Anya Sharma. I have 20 minutes before my next appointment, so please, tell me what happened. The facts, not just the feelings. There's no now there's never fight like 7, and never minervality." Her directness was bracing. I took a deep breath and laid out the story just as she'd asked. I told her about my fall, about Michael and Tiffany's sudden concern, about the stack of papers, and the notary who was Tiffany's friend. I finished by placing the certified copy of the quitclaim deed on her desk. She picked it up, her eyes scanning the document with an intensity that made me feel like she was seeing every lie, every betrayal embedded in the ink. She read it once, then twice. When she was done, she put it down and looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Okay," she said. "The undue influence and fraudulent inducement are clear, but he'll claim you signed it willingly." "It becomes a messy," he said. She said, So let's forget the signature for a moment, Mrs. Henderson. She leaned forward, her gaze sharp as a needle. Let's go back 40 years. When you and your late husband first bought the house, where did the down payment come from? The question was so unexpected it threw me completely off balance. The down payment? What does that have to do with anything? That was a lifetime ago. We saved up for it. Humor me, she insisted, her voice firm. Think back. Before your husband, before Michael, did you have any money of your own when you got married? I closed my eyes, forcing my mind to travel back through the decades, past the grief of losing Tom, past the joy of raising Michael, back to when I was just Carol, a young woman dreaming of a future. And then, like a photograph developing in a dark room, the memory surfaced, sharp and clear. My mother, just a few months before my wedding, pressing a check from her own life insurance policy into my hand. Her words echoed in my mind as if she had spoken them yesterday. This is for you, Carol, from your father and me, to give you a start we never had. Make sure you build something that's yours. My eyes snapped open. I stared at the young lawyer, the past and present, colliding in a blinding flash of revelation. It was an inheritance, I said, my voice trembling with a new, unfamiliar emotion. Hope. It was from my mother. $5,000. It was my money. Before I ever even met my husband, it was the entire down payment. For a moment, Anya Sharma just looked at me. The professional mask of impatience on her face softened, replaced by a flicker of something I hadn't seen yet, the keen, focused interest of a hunter who has just spotted a clear track. She leaned back in her squeaky office chair, and a slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't a warm smile, it was a predator's smile. Mrs. Henderson, she said, her voice now charged with a new energy, you didn't just give me a memory. You may have just handed me the legal weapon we need to blow this case wide open. I must have looked confused, because she leaned forward again, steepling her fingers on the desk. Okay, look, think of your marriage like a business you and your husband started together. Texas is a community property state, which means most of the money and assets you earned during the marriage belong to the business. That's community property. She picked up a pen. But that $5,000 inheritance from your mother? That was yours before you ever met your husband. It was your asset before the business of your marriage was ever formed. In the eyes of Texas law, that makes it your sole and separate property. It's yours and yours alone, like a family heirloom. Ham state. She used the pen to tap on the copy of the deed. You used your personal, separate property as the down payment on the house. That's an analogy for investing your own seed capital into the business. Yes, the business your marriage helped it grow, but the initial investment, the very foundation of the asset, came from you and you alone. It never fully lost its character as your separate property. The legal jargon which had once been a weapon used against me was now becoming my shield. A sense of clarity, of power, began to dawn on me. So, what does that mean? It means everything, Anya said, her eyes flashing. It means the house was never a simple marital asset that could be signed away with a single, tricky signature on a quitclaim deed. Your son didn't just convince you to sign a paper, he convinced you to give away your personal premarital inheritance without full legal disclosure of what you were doing. A judge is going to find that very, very interesting. I have the Parry Deltman. Her focus shifted from theory to practice. But a memory isn't enough. We need proof, data, evidence. Do you have any old bank statements? A copy of your mother's will? Anything, a letter? A savings passbook that can prove the source and timing of those funds from 40 years ago? The request felt impossible. 40 years ago? Anya, I don't know. I've moved things, cleaned out closets. It could be anywhere. Or nowhere. It's not now. Then you need to start looking, she said, her tone leaving no room for excuses. Now, here's what we do. We fight back on two fronts. She held up one finger. First, defense. This morning, I am filing a petition for a temporary restraining order and an emergency injunction to halt the eviction. The 30-day clock on that notice, we're going to freeze it. You are not going anywhere. She held up a second finger. Second, offense. We are filing a lawsuit against your son and his fiancée as a co-conspirator. Count 1. Fraudulent conveyance, for tricking you into illegally transferring the title. Count 2. Breach of fiduciary duty. When you signed that power of attorney, your son legally obligated himself to act in your best interest. Instead, he used it as a tool to defraud you. We are going to ask the judge to not only void the deed, but also to make him pay for all of your legal fees and damages. In rest prime. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. A plan. A real, tangible plan. It wasn't just a desperate hope, it was a legal strategy. But then Anya gave me a dose of the gentle counter-perspective I needed. "Now, listen to me, Carol," she said, her voice serious. "This is a strong argument, but it is not a silver bullet. The moment we file, they will get a lawyer, and their lawyer will do one thing. They will attack you. They will say you're confused, forgetful, senile. They will claim you gave Michael the house as a gift, and now you're changing your story. This will become a battle over your credibility. You need to be ready for that. Are you?" I thought of the cold look in my son's eyes. I thought of Tiffany's saccharine, false concern. I thought of the stale air of that motel room. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and hard as steel. "I'm ready." "Good," Anya said, a flicker of genuine respect in her eyes. She grabbed her phone and hit a button. "Sarah, get me Judge Evans's clerk. I need an emergency hearing. And start drafting a petition for a TRO, Henderson versus Henderson. I'll be there in 5 to sign it." She hung up and turned back to me, already a whirlwind of action. "Carol, your job is simple. Go back to that motel. Go through every old box you have, every photo album, every shoebox of receipts. You are looking for a 40-year-old piece of paper. It's a needle in a haystack, I know, but it's the needle that's going to win this fight." I walked out of that cramped legal aid office, not with a guarantee, but with something far more valuable, a weapon. The law, which had been twisted to undo me, was now the very thing that could save me. I wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. I was a plaintiff, and I had a case to build. The search for that needle in a haystack took me to the brink of despair. I spent 3 solid days in that motel room, which I had paid for with the last of my savings, surrounded by the dusty ghosts of my past. I tore through every shoebox of old photos, every dusty file folder, every forgotten corner of the few possessions I still had. On the evening of the 3rd day, tucked into the back of an old photo album, between a picture of Michael's first haircut and my wedding invitation, I found it. It was a bank statement from the First City National Bank, dated 40 years ago. It was brittle and yellowed with age, but the numbers on it were as clear as the day they were printed. The mediation was scheduled at a neutral law firm in a glass tower that scraped the Austin sky. The conference room was designed to be intimidating: a long, polished mahogany table, black leather chairs, and a floor-to-ceiling window with a panoramic view of a city I no longer felt a part of. Anya and I sat on one side. Across from us sat Michael, Tiffany, and their lawyer, a man with a $5,000 suit and a smile that never reached his cold, reptilian eyes. At the head of the table was the mediator, a retired judge whose face was a mask of professional neutrality. He began with the gentle counter-perspective of the system itself, laying out the battlefield in dispassionate terms. "Good morning. We are here to mediate the dispute regarding the property at 123 Chestnut Street. Mrs. Henderson, it is my understanding that you are alleging the transfer of title was fraudulent. Mr. Neri, Henderson, your position is that the property was a gift from your mother, and that she is now experiencing what is commonly known as donor's remorse. Is that an accurate summary?" Michael's lawyer, Mr. Davies, leaned forward. "It is, Your Honor. Furthermore, my client has a notarized quitclaim deed, signed by his mother, who was by all accounts of sound mind. We also have a sworn affidavit from the notary, Miss Albright, stating that Mrs. Henderson was not under any duress and fully understood the document she was signing. Frankly, we believe this entire suit is a frivolous action, spurred on by a desire for attention." He spoke about me as if I wasn't even in the room. He was trying to paint the picture his clients had sold him. I was a confused, emotional old woman. Anya let him finish. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. The mediator looked at her. "Miss Sharma, your response?" Anya simply nodded at me. This was my moment. My hands were trembling slightly, but my resolve was solid iron. I opened the old leather briefcase I had brought, I didn't pull out a stack of legal briefs. I pulled out a single yellowed piece of paper, now carefully preserved in a clear plastic sleeve. Putting that bank statement on the table felt like laying down the winning card in a game I never wanted to play. It was an old, fragile piece of paper, but in that sterile conference room, it had the weight of a granite slab. I slid it across the polished surface to the mediator. "What is this?" Mr. Davies asked with a dismissive sneer. "That," I said, my voice quiet but clear, "is my evidence." The mediator picked it up. He put on his reading glasses and studied it. Michael and Tiffany watched him, a flicker of uncertainty finally appearing on their smug faces. After a moment, the mediator looked up, his professional neutrality momentarily cracked. He cleared his throat. "This appears to be a bank statement from First City National Bank for a Miss Carol Albright, dated 39 years and 11 months ago. It shows a deposit of $5,000, noted as maternal estate distribution, and a subsequent withdrawal 2 weeks later for $5,000, noted as cashier's check to Austin Title Company." He looked over his glasses at Michael's lawyer. The data, the hard evidence, had changed the entire atmosphere of the room. Anya leaned forward, her voice calm and lethal. "As you now see, my client's sole and separate property, an inheritance received before her marriage, constituted the entire down payment for the house on Chestnut Street. The quitclaim deed she was tricked into signing is therefore invalid due to fraudulent conveyance of a separate asset without disclosure. She wasn't finished. Furthermore, my client has instructed me to inform you that if the deed is not immediately voided, and if Miss Henderson does not relinquish any and all future claims to the property, we will be taking this document, along with the evidence of his abuse of his power of attorney, to the Travis County District Attorney. We will be pursuing criminal charges for felony financial elder abuse." The threat landed with the force of a physical blow. The color drained from Tiffany's face. Michael looked like he was going to be sick. Their lawyer, Mr. Davies, was utterly blindsided. His whole case, built on the idea of my incompetence, had just been demolished by my 40-year-old act of careful record-keeping. He sputtered for a moment, then leaned over and began a frantic, whispered conference with his clients. I didn't need to hear the words. I could see it in their panicked eyes. The game was over. They had overplayed their hand and lost everything. After 5 agonizing minutes, Mr. Davies sat up straight, his face grim. He looked at the mediator. "My clients are prepared to agree to the terms proposed by Miss Sharma." The vindication was so sudden, so absolute, it left me breathless. The mediator, all business once again, began dictating the terms. The deed was void. A new document would be filed with the county, restoring the title to my name alone, free and clear. Michael would sign a legally binding agreement, relinquishing all rights to the property, now and forever. It was over. I had won. I stood up and gathered my things. I didn't look at Tiffany, but I did look at my son. I looked at Michael one last time across that long, polished table. There was no anger left in me, no sadness. There was just a vast, empty space where a mother's love had once been. He had made his choice, and now I was making mine. I turned my back on him and walked out of that room, leaving the ruins of his greed behind me. I was going home. Walking away from that mediation was like walking out of a tomb and into the sunlight. I had gone in as a victim and I walked out as the sole, undisputed owner of my life. The legal documents were filed the next day, wiping the slate clean. My house was mine again. But the battle was only halfway over. The house was saved, but I still had to save myself. 6 months have passed since that day. It's spring in Austin now, and the world feels new again. The house on Chestnut Street is the same, but it's also completely different. The first thing I did was hire a painter. The quiet, respectable beige walls that I had maintained for 40 years, the ones Tiffany had called a great neutral base, are now gone. My living room is a warm, sunny yellow. The hallway is a calming shade of sage green. The colors are for me. They make me happy. I sold the big, formal dining room set that we used maybe twice a year. In its place are 2 comfortable armchairs, a reading lamp, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with all the novels I'd always meant to read. The house is no longer a showroom for a life that was. It's a home for the life that is. The biggest change, though, is upstairs. Michael's old room, which for years had been a quiet shrine to his childhood, is gone. I packed away the baseball trophies and the faded posters. I donated his old bed to a shelter, and in its place, I built a studio. A potter's wheel sits in front of the window, catching the morning light. Shelves are lined with bags of clay and pots of colorful glazes. My hands, which had spent so many years cooking and cleaning for others, are now busy creating things for myself, things of beauty, things that are entirely, unapologetically mine. For 40 years, I thought of myself as the foundation of my family's home, buried, unseen, but essential for holding everything up. I realize now a foundation's only purpose is to bear a load. I've decided to be the frame instead, still providing structure, but reaching for the sunlight. The doorbell rings, but the sound doesn't fill me with dread anymore. I open it to my neighbor, Sarah. She's holding a tray of lemon bars. "Am I the first one here for the garden club meeting?" she asks with a smile. "You're right on time," I tell her, welcoming her into the home that is now filled with friends I have chosen, a community I am building for myself. As I arrange chairs in the living room, I think about the painful lesson at the heart of my story. Did it hurt to lose my son? Of course. There is a hole in my heart that will never fully heal. That is the gentle, terrible counter-perspective to my victory. But the truth is, I had already lost the boy I raised long before that day on the porch. His greed and Tiffany's ambition had consumed him. All I truly lost in that mediation room was the man who had replaced him, a stranger who happened to have my son's face. I've come to understand that there's a profound difference between loving sacrifice and self-annihilation. I sacrificed for my son, and I would do it again, but I will never again annihilate myself for anyone. My value is not dependent on my usefulness to others. My worth is inherent. It is mine. Anya Sharma, my brilliant, fierce lawyer, helped me with one last thing. We created an ironclad will and a living trust. Documents that ensure my home, my assets, and my future are protected by a wall of legal steel. I, and I alone, will be the author of my final chapter. My life is quieter now, but it's louder too. It's filled with the music I love, the laughter of good friends, and the satisfying hum of the potter's wheel. It's the sound of a woman building a new foundation, not of sacrifice, but of self. Carol's story is a reminder that the greatest sacrifices should be for ourselves. If you have been moved by her journey to justice, subscribe to The Silent Lie for more stories of vindication.